day everyone. Today we are going to talk about the different strategies in teaching social studies. Specifically, we are going to talk about the fundamental tools in planning social studies instruction. So the subtopics we're going to discuss are the following. First, planning as a tool for successful social studies instruction. Next, we will also going to use or discuss the cognitive taxonomy, an instructional guide for social studies, as well as the objectives to guide learners in the social studies instruction. So let's get started. Okay, but before we are going to present the objectives, we have here the report matrix. I will show to you this one. So, topics, intended learning outcomes. Intended learning outcomes are first, we have 4. Okay, so first, identify components of a learning objective. Write learner-centered, measurable objectives. Evaluate lesson plans and the alignment of their instruction, approaches, methods, techniques, and activities. And lastly, the students will be able to value the importance of social studies instructions by constructing authentic assessment tools. In planning for social studies instruction, we as an educator in SOCSTAD need to have an instruction that is systematized. So we need to say we follow a process. So first, we need to define or create the measurable specific learning objectives. We have also, from that objective, we utilize or choose the appropriate methods that are suited or matched to our objectives. Next, we will choose appropriate experience, select the materials, equipment, facilities. We have also implemented instruction, and eventually we evaluate outcomes if the outcomes or objectives are attained at the end of the session. And also, we are going to refine the process to see if there needs improvement or evaluation. Okay? So, in social studies, we will plan for instruction to be effective. So, accordingly, instructional planning according to Zulueta Francisco in the Principles of Teaching, they define instructional planning as the ability of the teacher to visualize, meaning to see, to overlook, and forecast into the future of what, how, and why of the teaching and learning process. So meaning to say, from this start, there is a planning of instruction. Before you as an educator in social studies, you need to have a plan, a vision, a specific learning objective to be attained at the end of the session, at the end of the period. So those objectives or activities must be demonstrated, or the students will be able to demonstrate at the end of the teaching and learning process, at the end of the class session. Okay? So, of course, in teaching social studies, there should be alignment. So if you as an educator in social studies, if your assignments, you have different activities and different materials that are going to use, your assignments and those activities must be aligned with your teaching strategies and of course with the assessments and objectives you crafted. So those should be aligned also with instructional goals you have and eventually to the curriculum. Specifically in our curriculum in social studies. Okay, so this is the curriculum guide para Lipunan. We have from grade 10 to grade 1 to grade 10. So these are the pillars of learning as well as different competencies or standards and different skills that need to be attained by the social studies learners and educators. So let's go back here again to our instructional plan. So we have here, using cognitive taxonomy as instructional guide for social studies. So according to Stephen Covey, of the author of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, as an educator, we need to begin with the end in mind. So what does it mean? Of course, in the teaching and learning process, you need to have a plan prior to your instruction, a preparation, a planning. So this includes thinking about who am I teaching? Of course, in the elements of the teaching and learning process, there are 3. First, you as an educator, you need to be expert in your subject to be taught. We need to have consider different multiple intelligences and learning styles and capabilities of our learner. So, who am I teaching? Of course, the second is the most important element in the teaching and learning process is we need to consider our learner. And lastly, the learning environment. So, of course, in the planning of instruction, what am I teaching? You need to consider the content, the subject matter. How will I teach? Those refers to the approach, your strategies, your methods, your techniques, as well as the different activities you're going to integrate in a specific lesson. And how will I know if the students understand? Of course, the best thing to do is you need to assess their learning. You need to evaluate through assessment, through having an activities. So of course, with that, very important you have as a tool in social studies is to have a lesson plan. So lesson plan, we have to begin with the end in mind. So what does it mean? Let's explore further. So in the lesson plan, there are different components we have, or parts, in detailed or semi-detailed. So we have objectives, subject matter, procedure, evaluation, and assignment. So specifically, the objectives is composed of 3 domains of learning. What are those 3 domains of learning? We have the CPA, the cognitive domain, the psychomotor domain, and the affective domain. When we say cognitive domain, it refers to our thinking ability, the ability to think of our students, the intellectual capacity. Next one, we have the psychomotor domain, their ability to manipulate, the physical skills, manipulate objects, psychomotor. And lastly, the affective domain, the touch. We need to touch the hearts of our students, the spiritual values they have. So, yeah. And we have also another component of a lesson plan is the subject matter. This refers to the content, the lesson that you are going to teach. And this includes references, the sources, the books, the modules that the lessons coming from, and as well as the instructional materials, educational videos, PowerPoint, books, pen, chart, pictures. So this includes these instructional materials. And of course, procedure, we have preparation, drill, you may have this, like for instance, pre-test for a specific lesson, review is good because the students will be refreshed based from the previous discussion, and also there will be continuity with the previous lesson to the present lesson with the review. They will going to integrate, diba? One of the approach of social studies is integrity. So they will going to integrate the previous and the present lesson, continuity of the lesson, and as well as you can include motivating activity to ignite their interest in learning, and also presentation, generalization of lesson, and application of their learning. So how they are going to apply their learning, of course, you can include the activities that are suited to your lesson objectives that should be aligned. This procedure here, this entire procedure and content of your lesson plan should be aligned with the objectives you have. So the materials must be suited to objectives. So we have also the last 2, evaluation. So you need to assess the learning of your students by having evaluation, activities, quizzes, multiple choice, drills. And we have lastly, it's optional assignment, enrichment or enhancement activity. So we have also, during the 1956, Benjamin Bloom composed the taxonomy of learning objectives. So he is the founder of that cognitive domain and the different domains of learning. So using objectives to guide learners, let's try to assess these sample objectives here. Okay, you can pause this video for 5 minutes and you will prepare your piece of paper, you write your answer. Okay, can you spot the bad ones? So you just we will try to assess these objectives. Okay, first objective, arrange the steps of the scientific method from start to finish. Is it good or bad objective? So next one, as a social studies teacher, you crafted a specific objective like this: develop problem solving skills and conflict resolution. Develop, is it a good verb to be used in this objective? Another one, students will be able to demonstrate class participation. Next, compare the positive and negative aspects of non-renewable and renewable energy sources. Next one, value exercise stress reduction tool. Next, analyze and identify ways in which our multicultural environment affects healthcare decisions, and appreciate the value of people's differing worldviews and self-perceptions based upon the cultural constructions of gender, sexuality, race, and class. Okay, can you assess? Can you spot the bad ones? Okay, so later on we'll try to find out. Okay, of course there are checklists in order for you to consider if it's good, specific, or bad objectives. So first, does the objective focus on student performance? Is the task measurable or observable? What criteria will I use to establish the objective that has been reached? Another checklist is the learning objective written in terms of observable behavioral outcomes. Is the learning objective clear and concise? Does the learning objective describe expectations of student performance at the completion of instructional activity? Does the learning objective utilize an effective action verb that targets the desired level of performance? Okay, another one. Are the learning objective aligned with the instructional activities and assessments? Are there any alignment? Does the learning objective specify appropriate conditions for performance? Is the learning objective written in terms of observable behavioral outcomes? Is the learning objective clear and easily understood by the learner? Or are the learning objectives identified and reinforced in each module or learning unit? So, that are some of the checklists for you to know if the objectives are good or bad. So, if they are good, then it's better. Okay? So, what is the learning objective, by the way? When we say learning objective, they are the statement, or it is a statement of what students will be able to do when they have completed the instruction. Meaning to say, they are the statement in specific and measurable terms that describes what the learner will know and be able to do. They are the specific skills of what the students can know, be able to do at the end of the instruction, at the end of the class session. Okay? So meaning to say, they are the specific knowledge, skills, and values the students are being able to demonstrate at the end of the class period. So they refers the result of the instruction rather than the process of instruction, the ends rather than the means, learning objective. Okay? Why do we need learning objectives? Of course, social studies teachers, they are our guide, a blueprint in the teaching and learning process. They are a guide for the selection of our content. They could have the development of an instructional strategy. To know, they are the guide for appropriate instructional approaches, methods, strategies, techniques, as well as the activities that are suited to the lesson objectives. We can also have the development and selection of instructional materials. They could give what are the appropriate instructional materials and educational resources that could be used in a specific lesson, of course, that are aligned to the objectives. And they could also have the construction of tests and other instruments for assessing and then evaluating student learning outcomes. By having the objective, like for instance, you are going to evaluate the learning of the students of the pros and cons of Republic Act 11479. Of course, what is your assessment tools? You can have a debate. Yes, so exact example is like for instance. And then we have another one. Of course, in making or crafting lesson objectives, there are principles that are used to be guide in this specific activity, planning instruction. So principles in determining and formulating lesson learning objectives. First, we need to begin with the end in mind. So I've said, before you enter in a class, you have a vision. At the end of my class session, what are expected of the students? They should be able to define, create something, to produce something at the end of the class. So there should be target, measurable, specific objectives or action that are evidence or concrete evidence of learning. Next one, share lesson objective with students. Of course, it is a must that you need to to share your lesson objective for them to focus more and become motivated in the activities of the entire duration of the teaching and learning process. Another principle, we have lesson objectives must be in 2 or 3 domains: knowledge, cognitive, skill, psychomotor, and values affective. The lesson objectives must have these 2 or 3 domains. So the very important domain that should not be excluded is the affective domain or the values domain, because we are, as a social studies teacher, we are going to produce a thinking and feeling being. The mapanuri, maalahanin, makabayan, makabansa, makakalikasan, nationalistic, patriotic, responsible citizens in our country. There. So, another principle, work on significant and relevant lesson objectives. So the lesson objectives must be meaningful to the students. Another principles in determining and formulating learning objectives is lesson objective must be aligned with the aims of education as embodied in the Philippine Constitution and other laws and the mission statements of the education institution of which you are a part. Specifically, in the 1987 Constitution, as a social studies teacher, we need to create a responsible, productive citizens that our nationalism and patriotism must be evident. And of course, they should be able to preserve and enrich the culture of our country. So, another principle in determining and formulating learning objectives is aim at the development of critical and creative thinking. So, 21st century skills must be taught. They will be able to develop the creativity, the collaborative, the communication, as well as the problem-solving skills of our students. And of course, when crafting lesson objectives, learning objectives, it should be SMART. What does it mean? Specific, measurable, attainable, result-oriented and relevant, and as well as time-bound and terminal. Okay? So what do you mean by specific? When we say specific, you should use only one action verb. Like for instance, to be able to identify the different elements of map. Next one, measurable. So it should be evident. The objectives must be measurable, meaning to say there is a concrete evidence of learning. Also, it should be attainable, resource-oriented and relevant, time-bound and terminal. So, meaning to say you set target. So at the end of this 1-hour session, the students will be able to use that target, specific allotted time for specific activities. Okay? Next one. So what are the parts of a learning objective? There are descriptions of what the student will be able to do, the conditions under which the student will perform the task, and the criteria for evaluating student performance. So those are specific parts of a learning objective. Okay, so there should be an action verb. Do not use verbs that are broad, like to be able to learn, to develop. Also the conditions of the task. How will it be developed? How will it be performed by the students? Using a timeline, using a map, and criteria for evaluating student performance. Like for instance, the students will be able to identify the different countries of the world. They will be able to identify the continents, the major continents of the world, 5 out of 7. They will be able to identify the different tourist spots of the Philippines, 30 out of 35 tourist spots. So that's your criteria, for instance. Okay, so we have another one. Okay, accordingly, the parts is also known as the ABCDs of learning objectives, or the Robert Muger's elements of an objective. So of course, basically when we say objective, they should be composed of 3 domains of learning, at least 2 or 3: cognitive domain, the mental ability, psychomotor domain, the physical skills, or psychomotor domain, the affective domain, or the spiritual values of our students. And the ABCDs of learning, ABCD, audience. Who are our audience? Who is our audience? Of course, in the learning process, the core of the teaching and learning process should be our learner. We need to consider their multiple intelligences and learning styles when crafting the learning objectives. Are they capable of doing this one? Yes. So learning, our objective. objectives or audience is the learner. Performance behavior, how they are going to demonstrate their learning behavior through they will be able to create an economic development plan. So example of behavior. Next one, condition. How will it be performed? By using a timeline, by using a map, by using a rubric in performing that specific activity, criterion. So what level of performance do you expect? So criterion or degree, what level of performance do you expect? Like for instance, they will be able to enumerate all the capitals of the world in not less than 5 minutes. Imagine, right? Okay, in the stages of the teaching and learning process, there are 3 parts. There are desired results, the intended learning outcomes that the students will be able to demonstrate at the end of the teaching and learning process. The assessment or evidence of their learning, as well as the learning activities that should be aligned with their learning objectives. So there should be appropriate alignment of these terms. Okay, how the parts interact, of course. So for instance, I have here example. The student will create a timeline of the main events of Gettysburg after generating a graphic organizer in Chapter 5 at decisive battle with a rubric rating 3 out of 5 or better. So behavior, what students will be able to do. So in this case, students will create behavior, create a timeline of the main events of Gettysburg. Conditions, how will they be able to do it? After generating a graphic organizer. Criterion, degree of accuracy observed with a rating rubric of 3 out of 5 or better. So that's the criteria. Okay? Next, of course, in order for a social studies educator for their learners to achieve a holistic learning, our objectives must be composed of cognitive, the head or the knowledge, the affective domain, the attitudes or the heart, and the skills or the psychomotor domains. We need to say cognitive refers to thought or knowledge, affective feelings or choices, psychomotor skills. So for a holistic learning, the mind, the heart, and the hands must be touched by our learning objectives. So in lesson plan of Araling Panlipunan, they should be taught. And of course, we as educators of social studies, we are responsible for creating a responsible thinking, feeling citizen. Okay, so we have here the taxonomy of objectives, the cognitive domain as designed by Benjamin Bloom in 1956, and eventually it was revised by his student Alderson. So from the noun to the verb, from noun to the verb level. Okay, in the previous cognitive domain, the levels are knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. But eventually, it became a more concrete or complex. We need to say HOTS, higher order thinking skill. So in now, it is remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, grading. So before the social studies learners will be able to understand a concept, they must remember them. Before they can apply concepts, they must understand it. And before they are going to analyze something, they should be applied. Before they are going to evaluate, they should be analyzed. And before create, they should have remembered, understood, applied, analyzed, and evaluated. There. So this remembering, applying, and analyzing, this refers to the lower order thinking skills. So social studies, we need to reach these analyzing, evaluating, creating, because they consider as the higher order thinking skills of our students. Next one, taxonomy of objectives, crafted by Kraftwell, receiving as the lowest level, going to the more complex, which is the characterization, receiving, responding, valuing, organization, and characterization. And we have also the psychomotor, commonly by Harrow and Harlock, reflex movements, fundamental movements, perceptual abilities, physical abilities, skilled movements, non-discursive communication, and we have trial and error, imitation, and training under non-discursive communication. So we need to say the holistic learning will be achieved if these 3 domains of learning will be tapped. Okay, other list of words that could be used in the knowledge, recognize, comprehension, summarize. Let's, for instance, understanding in social studies, they will be able to interpret the diagram of statistics. So that's fall, that will be fall, can fall in the comprehension or understanding level. Application, analysis, synthesis, evaluation. Okay, another one, these are the list words: knowledge, match, comprehension, summarize, application, predict something, demonstrate, solve problems, analysis or analyze, illustrate. We have also compare and contrast. That could be fall under the analysis level. Synthesis, they will be able to design something. They will be able to create an economic development plan, specific in economics. Yeah. Evaluation, they will be able to evaluate. And of course, they will be able to create something if they have already know the low level of taxonomy of cognitive domain. Okay, so these are the words that could be used from simple to complex, from knowledge to evaluating and creating. We have also here the psychomotor domain, from simple to complex, perception to organization. Another one, list of words from simple to complex are VOC, receiving, responding, valuing, organization, and characterization under the affective domain. And these are the corresponding list of words that we could use in this specific domain. Okay, so there are 30 dozen that 12 words that should never use in learning objectives as much as possible. They should never use. Okay, like for instance, understand, know, comprehend, learn. So under cognitive domain, they are broad. Why? Because they are ambiguous. What does it mean to understand something? How will you going to demonstrate, or how are you going to assess as a self-study teacher that they will be able to understand the concept, that they know that concept? Of course, you could have a better choices. You can use these words: describe, list, recall, recognize, explore, reflect, or think critically. There are also noted words. Why? These are mental processes that we cannot see and therefore cannot measure. And pwede, we can have a better choices. We can use analyze, assess, evaluate, appreciate, enjoy, believe, value, experience are also the same. They are noted words. Why? Because these are subjective emotional responses, not indicators of learning. So better to use list, describe, summarize. Also, commonly used words in affective domain are the appreciate and value. So this depends on the crafting of the learning objectives. Like for instance, appreciate the value of family planning. You can have appreciate the value of family planning by constructing a video about family planning, or appreciate, value the importance of nationalism by having an exhibit. So we need to say it's measurable because there's an concrete evidence. They could have an exhibit composed of different learning values, learning different Filipino delicacies, Filipino materials that are essential, that are concrete evidence of learning. So previously, we have objectives that are being assessed by you. So let's try to find out if these adjectives are bad for you. So learning objective number 1, arrange the steps of the scientific method from start to finish. Is it good? Yes, because it is specific, measurable, student-friendly language. Arrange the steps. Let's check. Develop problem-solving skills and conflict resolution. Why it's bad? Because vague, ambiguous, and no condition develop. So better choices, they could list or solve the problem. There. Students will be able to demonstrate class participation. Demonstrate. So it's broad. So it's vague or describes a task. Compare the positive and negative aspects of non-renewable and non-renewable energy sources. So it is better. It is a good objective because compare specific, measurable objective. Value exercise is a stress reduction tool. Value is a subjective, it's vague. And identify and analyze ways in which our multicultural environment affects healthcare decisions. Identify and analyze. Diba? One of the principles of learning is be specific, be smart, specific. It uses here 2 verbs. Therefore, it is not specific. The ability to identify is implied. Learners can analyze. So, it's bad. we better to use one verb rather, and appreciate the value of people's differing worldviews and self-perceptions based upon the cultural constructions of gender, sexuality, race, and class. This is a bad objective because appreciate is subjective emotion, and of course, it is not measurable. How? It is incomplete. Okay? Next one. Using objectives in social studies to design assessments. So objectives dictate the type of assessment to conduct. Looking at the abstraction verb in the objective should indicate the appropriate means of measuring that objective. So recognize may indicate matching, multiple choice, etc. Lower level thinking, like for instance in geography class, they will be able to match the capitals of the different countries. So recognize, you could use matching type. So that is a line. Example, demonstrate may indicate a performance assessment or higher level demands. So demonstrate, of course, when you are going to have a performance assessment, to be fair in judging or in rating the outputs of your students, it is better to have a rubric. To be fair, and of course, there are two types of rubric, the holistic rubric and analytic rubric. So rubric in analytic, it could shows the strengths and weaknesses of our students because it is specific. They have the means of specific criteria that can be assessed. Okay, assess all objectives. Every objective must be measured. Of course, you as a social studies teachers, your objective must be measured. If you have a kind of objective, they should be reflected in the teaching and learning process, the procedure in your lesson planning. Data must be available to show evidence also that each objective has been measured. So the result of the activities, the instructional materials, the resources must be reflected in a line. And student-focused outcomes, of course, what are the goals for the goods or potentials holistic learning for our students? So they should be focused outcomes towards our students. Objectives should be worded to express what the student will learn, know, or do as a result of instruction, or how the student will change developmentally because of the learning. Not what the instructor or program will do for the student. So of course, the students should be able to demonstrate. They should be the one to have the demonstration of learning. Okay, so as a social studies teacher, we need to teach based on content and we need to test over the objective. Teach based on objective and assess based from the objective. So there should be alignment with your procedures, teaching approaches, strategies, methods, as well as techniques. Okay, in teaching social studies, of course, we need to cater to different multiple intelligences and learning styles of our students. So we will not just stick to one method, strategy. It is better also to integrate educational technologies or websites in teaching social studies. So accordingly to the principles, the more sensible, the better the retention of the learning is. So if there is the sense of sight, the sense of touch, the sense of smell, they'll be able to manipulate something, there is a better learning of our students. So there are different tools that are free that we could use as a social studies educators. We have here study.com, World History Portal, Teachnology. Other here, Google Arts and Culture, Crash Course, the National Geographic Kids, Smithsonian Education, Mr. Beats Social Studies Channel, and TED. Okay? So now I will have here specific areas of social studies, specialization. I will let you to construct a measurable learning objectives which compose of different domains of learning, the cognitive, the psychomotor, the affective domains of learning, and give activities that are aligned to them. Okay, so let's start. Filipino family, social studies. Let's have here the society, culture, and planning. Okay, you construct a measurable learning objective. You can pause this video in order for you to write your learning objectives. Okay, like for instance, I have here the different domains of learning. Let's start cognitive domain. They will be able to compare and contrast natural family planning and artificial family planning. So that's one. It's higher order thinking skills already. Analyzation. Next one. How about psychomotor? We could have, they will be able to create a vlog or presentation about the Filipino family, traits and values, showing the traits and values of a Filipino family. Also, the effective domain, they will be able to appreciate the importance of family by writing an essay. Yan. Okay, another topic here. Let's have here the sustainable development goals, trends, and issues in social studies. Like for instance, picture analysis. Okay, what are the learning objectives that you can come out of this topic? Like for instance, let's specific goals of sustainable development. Let's have here 13 climate action. Like for instance, in the cognitive domain, they will be able to identify the different pollution that could harm the environment. How about psychomotor? They will be able to create a song. At the end of the lesson, they will be able to compose a song about the protection of the mother nature. And how about the affective domain? They will be able to write the importance of protecting the environment. They will be able to value the significance of mother nature through creating a collage. Okay, that's example. Then we have here, they could also have after the activity or the lesson, you could also use this countdown chart. Countdown chart, 3 things I learned from the activity, 2 ways where I can use what I learned, and 1 question answered during the discussion. Okay, next one. How about culture? Our topic is culture. So picture analysis. Study the picture below, discuss your thoughts about the picture, emphasizes the importance of cultural diversity. Refer to the rubric given by your teacher. Next one, we have also about that specific topic, culture. We could have also research. So you will give the research link, the students will read the research and eventually make a matrix or evaluation about the findings of the research. They can also have this matrix, problem, research methodology, findings, recommendations, as well as they will be able to cite the research or that publication. Also, we could have also code analysis in teaching social studies. So, you could give a famous quote or quote related to the specific topic, then eventually they will analyze what's the topic all about. So in this case, explain the message famous quote of Robert Allen Arthur. Your answer must be composed of 2 paragraphs with 4 sentences each paragraph. And of course, how are we going to rate? To have a fair rating in the output, we need to use rubric or criteria in rating. Another topic, Anti-Terrorism Act of 2020. Example in cognitive, you can have to analyze the pros and cons of Anti-Terrorism Act. Also, you can have they be able to make a graphic organizer showing the positive and negative of this Republic Act 11479 or Anti-Terrorism Act of 2020. We could have also in the affective domain, they could write an essay about the importance of implementing this act. Or you could have a debate. Evaluate if this law is good or bad to the society, to the country. Next, let's have the lesson plan critiquing. Okay? Let's have here lesson plan. Let's evaluate different lesson plans from the junior and junior level as well as an English lesson plan. Okay, let's get started. Okay, let's evaluate this lesson plan, Neraling Panipunan 7. Learning competency came from the curriculum guide. Okay, learning competency na bibigyan kahulugan ng konsepto ng kabihasnan at nailalahad ang mga katangian nito. So, we have here different learning objectives or layunin. Pagkatapos ng 50 minutong talakayan, we need to say it specific. There is a time, target in the specific lesson. 50 minutong talakayan, ang mga mag-aaral ay inaasahang nasusuri ang iba't ibang sistema ng kabihasnang customer sa pamamagitan ng fly to Sumerian. Nabibigyang diin ang kahalagahan ng iba't ibang sistema ng kabihasnang Sumer sa pamamagitan ng toolbox at nailalahad ang iba't ibang sistema ng kabihasnang Sumer sa pamamagitan ng picture mo present mo. Okay, paksang aralin or the subject matter, content. Paksa, kabihas ng Sumer. Konsepto, ang Sumer ay isang sinaunang kabihasnan at historical na rehiyon sa Mesopotamia sa modernong Iraq noong mga panahong Chalcolithic at maagang panahon ng Tanso. Kahalagahan or values integration na isagawa ang unang sistema ng pagsulat ang pagkakaroon ng pagkakaisa sa isang lipunan or unity in society. So you can also better to have values integration in your topic. As a social studies teacher, of course, we need to touch more on the effective domain of our students. So, kahalagahan or values integration. Next one, we could also include the sanggunian or reference. Asya, pagkakaisa sa gitna ng pagkakaiba. So, in this case, this sanggunian is incomplete. Is it a book? So, if a book, you better to cite the author, the year of the book, the publishing house, edition also. There are pages here, so it's good, but there should be author and the title of the book should be included here. So, another critic, also, kagamitan, cartulina, sticky notes, pictures, tali, aeroplano, at illustration board. So, this, as you can see, these instructional materials that are going to be used in the specific lesson are in line with these learning objectives. Okay, pamamaraan or procedure. Panimulang gawain, panalangin, pagbati or pagganyak or motivating activity. Magpapakita ang guro ng isang larawan na may kaugnayan sa kabihas ng Sumer. Magtatanong ang guro sa mga mag-aaral kung ano ang kanilang napapansin sa larawan na ipinapakita na nakabatay sa tali. Let's scrutinize the paglalahad. Hahatiin ang buong klase sa 3 pangkat. Bawat pangkat ay makikinig sa guro kung ano ang kanyang nais na ipagawa. So, let's have here the specific gawain niya. Bawat mag-aaral ay pansamantalang isang zombie sa loob ng 2 minuto. Upang mawala ang pagiging zombie, ay kailangan bombahin ito gamit ang aeroplano. Okay? Objectives are still not reflected in the procedure. So, in this preparatory procedure, let's move on. Ang bombang inihulog sa bawat pangkat ay magsisilbing isang artikulo tungkol sa kabihas ng Sumer at kailangan nila itong basahin at unawain at pagkatapos ay gagawa nila ng sariling information graph board sa loob lamang ng 8 minutes. So within 8 minutes, they will be able to make a information graph board about the Sumer civilization. Pagtatalakay, fly to Sumerian. Sa oras na ito ay magkakaroon ng field trip ang buong klase sa pamamagitan ng fly to Sumerian. Gagawin ito gamit ng eroplano at ito ay pupunta sa lahat ng pangkat. So bawat pangkat ng mahito ng eroplano ay magtatalakay ng kanilang ginawa na information graph board. Sa pamamagitan nito ay matatalakay nila ang lahat ng information tungkol sa kabihas ng Sumer. So meaning to say, fly to Sumerian. In this specific process, learning objective number 1 is attained. Nasusuri, they will be able to analyze the different information about the Sumer civilization through making an information graph board. So, lesson objective number 1, check, is attained. Next one, pagpapahalaga or paglalahat toolbox. Ang susunod na gawain ay gagamitan ng toolbox ng eroplano na kung saan sa loob nito ay may mga katanungang nakalaan. Ang mga katanungang ito ay gagamitin upang mabigyan din ng importansya ang mga impormasyon tungkol sa kabihas ng Sumer. Ang kanilang sagot ay sulat sa sticky note. Okay, toolbox. We have specific learning objective number 2 na bibigyang halagahan. Check. It is attained by having this one. Okay, by having this one, fly to Sumerian. Okay, next, fly to Sumerian, toolbox. So, mabibigyan din at importansya ang mga impormasyon. So, they will be able to cite the importance of the Sumer civilization by having this activity. So, learning objective number 3, check, is attained in this process. Okay, another one. So, these are the questions, gabay na katanungan or guide questions. Paano nabuo ang sistema ng kabihas ng Asyano through different aspects. Reliyon, politika, ekonomiya, at panlipunan. Paano naka-impluensya ang geografiya ng Mesopotamia sa pag-usbong ng kabihas ng Sumerian? Bakit nakatulong ang mga ilog sa pag-usbong ng kabihas ng Sumer sa Asya? Ano ang pangunahing dahilan kung bakit maraming pangkat ang taong naghahangad na makontrol ang mga lupain kung saan itinatag ang kabias ng Sumer? Bilang isang mag-aaral, paano mo mapapahalaga na pag-usbong tagabias ng Sumer sa kasalukuyan? So meaning to say, these specific objectives number letter B is attained through having this activity. Of course, as a social studies teacher, we need to be attentive to technicalities, grammar, punctuation. For instance, in this lesson plan, Asiano, Sumerian, Asya. So they are proper nouns, so they should be capitalized. Use capital letter. Okay? Present mo, picture present mo, paglalampat, application. Sa gawaing ito ay kailangang ipresenta ng bawat pangkat ang nakuhang larawan sa eroplano. Ang pagpresenta ay nakabatay kung anong sistemang nakuha sa kabias ng Sumer na nakabatay sa larawan. Okay, bawat pangkat ay pipili ng representante. We have here, maghintay sa panuto ng guro, and mga gawain. In terms of different aspects of Sumer civilization, simulation, ekonomiya at lipunan, newscasting, kausbong at politika, sabayang kabigas, relihiyon. So different systems, we have here attained yung letter C, na ilahad ang iba't ibang sistema ng kabias ng Sumer, present mo, picture mo. So objective number 3 is attained. Check. Okay? Next one, pagtataya, evaluation, ang kanilang punto sa paglalahad ay magsisilbing puntate sa oras na ito. So of course, to be able to be fair in judging, we need to use criteria. So in this case, holistic rubric, pamantayan, nilalaman 20, paglalahad, epekto madla, and so on. And takdang aralin optional, magsaliksik ng iba't pang kabias na nagpusbong sa Asya, ilagay sa A4 bond paper. And of course, this assignment is incomplete because there should be a target date or the deadline of submission for the students. Okay? Okay, another example of lesson plan we have here. Okay, of course, it is better if you should indicate the date and time allotted for that specific lesson. So in this case, we have here objectives. At the end of the lesson, 90% of the students are expected to define globalization, make a graphic organizer depicting globalization and its related concepts, and value the importance of globalization through writing an essay and making a slogan. So, cognitive, psychomotor, and the affective domains of learning. So, check, complete. Okay, subject matter, the structures of globalization is the topic. Reference, I've been analyzing Claudius 2018, the contemporary world. We have the publishing pages also of the book where the contents came from, and the instructional materials to be used, book, marker, PowerPoint, values integration, being globally minded, and being knowledgeable. Okay, let's try to find out if these objectives are attained or reflected in the teaching and learning process or the procedure of the lesson plan. Okay, procedure, preliminary activities. Also, one of the better ways to improve your lesson plan is to allot time for a specific component of your lesson plan. Like for instance, in our case, preliminary activities is only intended for 5 minutes. Motivating activity 5 minutes. Analysis 7 minutes. Of course, ideally they should be followed or be guide or a guide to have this specific activity. It should be consumed for this minutes. Okay, but not necessary that, like for instance, in here we could use 2 minutes only for preliminary activities. So more time to be allotted in the analysis level because it will consume the higher order thinking skills of our students. So let's have a motivating activity by picture analysis. So the teacher will show pictures related to globalization concepts. She will ask the students to generate ideas and opinions about them. So basically, motivating activity to ignite the interest of our students to be able to compose ideas about the picture. So we have here analysis. Intended for 7 minutes, the teacher will ask the following. What is globalization? Is it beneficial or detrimental? What are the advantages and disadvantages brought by globalization? So in this specific analysis, it is low-level questions only. So better if we can use how and why questions to improve this one. So abstraction intended for only 20 minutes. So let's have here the application 8 minutes, group activity worth for 15 points. Make a graphic organizer depicting globalization and its related concepts, criteria, content, creativity, neatness. So, second lesson objective rather, make a graphic organizer. It's being reflected in the lesson plan, which is obtained. Check. How about the number 1 objective, define globalization. It is reflected in the entire lesson plan. The specific area, define what's globalization by having this one, criteria, content, grammar. So check yung objective number 1 natin. Another objective, value the importance of a globalization through writing an essay which consists of 5 to 7 sentences only. Lesson objective in the affective domain, check, as attained and reflected in the lesson plan. And we have here, by creating an essay and making a slogan. Make a slogan about the importance of globalization in a long bond paper, provide a short explanation. We have also criteria, and also you could also have prepared by and checked by in your lesson plan. And these are the references that I used in crafting this PowerPoint. So thank you so much for listening. I hope you learned something.